Good question.
Yes.
I've preached once so far, and I'll be preaching again in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, good.
That was fine.
Oh, you're at
Yeah.
chapel?
Chapel and
Oh,
CrossPoint. Yeah.
because I remember that Nathan preached quite a bit before he became ordained.
Yeah.
So it's your turn. Okay.
That was a governor's rotation, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of short.
It's Father Chuck's discretion. He can tell us when and where. We can obey. That's how it works. All right, so you guys don't have the countdown there. I've got the countdown up there. So half a minute away here.
So our room's gotten smaller.
Yeah, we got the faithful few dudes.
Some more online.
Yeah, I'm sure there's one online.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even drive in the dark. Are we live, Ben?
We are.
All right. Well, I've said hello to a bunch of you already, but welcome officially to, I believe this is week 6, right? Week 6 of this teaching series on miracles in the Gospel of Luke. Oh, the handouts are in the back on that little pedestal there. I'm sorry I missed you there. And hello to everyone who is with us on the live stream as well. I don't want to leave you out. We're glad that you're here. For any who don't, that I've not yet met, my name is Dave, and I want to welcome you to this 3-hour teaching tonight. Just kidding. We'll see. What we're looking at here is a mosaic depiction of the story we're going to be looking at tonight. This comes from the 6th century, from a basilica in what is now northern Italy. And we have Jesus here, and he is casting the demons out of this man into the pigs, and the pigs are headed into the water. So that's the story in one snapshot. That's the story that we're going to be reading tonight and looking through together. So let's get right into it. I'm going to encourage you, even though we're going to have the text on the TV and on the screens, that's just for the people online. I'm going to encourage you guys to take a look at the one that you have in your hand and pick up a pen as we go. Pick up a pen from the pew in front of you and mark it up, all right? We're going to be talking after this about what you see, what you feel when you read this, what your questions are, and I want you to feel free to interact with it. So grab a pen, and here we go. I'm going to read it for us. This is from Luke chapter 8, beginning with verse 26. So they arrived in the region of the Gerasenes, across the way from Galilee. As Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. For a long time he had been homeless and naked, living in the tombs outside of town. As soon as he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell down in front of him. Then he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. The spirit had often taken control of the man. Even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he simply broke them and rushed out into the wilderness, completely under the demon's power. Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, for he was filled with many demons. The demons kept begging Jesus not to send them into the bottomless pit. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby, and the demons begged him to let them enter into the pigs. So Jesus gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire because the demons begged not to go into the abyss. And I love that you're using the word abyss. That was not in the translation that I read here. But abyss, we're going to come back to that. The demons are saying, don't send us into the abyss. But they end up into deep water. So we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that. What happened? What happened when the pigs died? What other questions? Why pigs? Great question. Great question. We will connect to that as well.
You could underline several questions.
Yeah?
Is this just a first century phenomenon?
Sure.
Or does it apply today also?
Is this just a first century phenomenon, or does this apply today? Wonderful question. Question many people ask about these stories. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to acknowledge right now there's some risk in the way I'm trying to do this tonight. I'm trying to compile some questions, and then I'm trying to come back to them in the teaching when I get there. But if we make it to the end, and I have not addressed your question, I lose track of one, because I'm writing down the big one here, which is dangerous. If I lose track of one, let's try and come back to it again. Yes? Right. What kind of news do the herdsmen spread? Right? We hear this often in the Gospels. Somebody sees something that happens that Jesus does, and they go and run and they tell everyone. Right? In this case, spoiler alert, it doesn't look like they told it as though it was good news in this case. Right? We're going to come back to that. That's a great point. Great point. Yeah? We're going to do a spot there. Is it not on the street? Here. All right. Yeah, one more question. Sure thing. Why would the people beg Jesus to go away? That's an excellent question. We are headed right there in point 4 about the reactions. We will get to that. Don't worry.
I'll give you a softball.
Okay. All right, Bruce.
What is a fine Jewish boy like Jesus and the disciples doing around a bunch of pigs?
Yep. What is Jesus doing with his disciples? All these good Jewish boys. What are they doing around a herd of pigs? That's a great question. We're going to come to that. Yes, back and then front, Mike.
Without knowing what the guy did and what his history was, you know what I mean? We can assume that he wasn't a murderer, maybe, because they would have stoned him to death. You know, what was his background?
Yeah.
They kept him around.
Yeah. What was the background of this man? That's a great question. And part of your question there, you said they kept him around.
They kept him around
But
they stoned a lot of people back in those days.
That's true.
It take a lot to not get stoned.
That's true. But they did not keep him inside the town. And we're going to come back to that. Mike.
Mine's not so much a question, but I said to myself that they must not be Jews if they're herding pigs.
They must not be Jewish folks if they're herding pigs. That's exactly right, Mike. So we are going to get into, very soon, we're going to get into the background. First, I'm going to give you kind of a couple of my starting off premises for this. I've got a heading here that says 2 temptations. And these are
a lot of times in life and in our faith, there's a ditch on each side of the road, right? There's a ditch we can end up in over here that's not where we want to be. And there's a ditch we can end up in over here, and that's also not where we want to be. And we want to stay on the road, right? We want to stay in between them. And the first ditch, or the first temptation that I want us to avoid as we read this story, is what I have called here very scientifically cartoonification. All right? When we hear about, oh, these demons got cast into these pigs, and these pigs all run right down the hillside into the lake, problem solved. Sometimes we read that and we start to see like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner or something, right? At least for me, there's a temptation to dismiss it because it looks very neat and tidy. It almost seems funny in some ways, what happens to these demons. And there may be some humor intended by the author. There's an argument to be made for that there's a way in which these demons kind of ask for something and they don't realize what they're asking for. And we'll get to that. But I want us to be careful not to take this too lightly. The comment was already made, I feel bad for the pigs. And we shouldn't miss the fact that there is evil in this story. And there is death in this story that takes place. And there's danger in missing that, in taking it too lightly. And I would respond to that first question about whether this guy was just crazy or whether there were actual demons at play here. There's actual evil at play. I would say that if we trust the scriptures, if we trust what's been handed down and written for us, the scriptures that we believe are true, we have demons that are speaking to Jesus in this story. We have demons who are making true statements about who Jesus is that the people around don't even know. And so if we believe the script, how should I say this? I'll leave it to you whether or not you believe the scriptures. But what the author is telling us and what we believe the Holy Spirit is telling us through the scripture is that there are beings here who are conversing intelligently with Jesus through the mouth of a human. That Jesus is interacting with a spiritual being or a number of spiritual beings in this story. So, what was the question? Are you saying the devil is in him?
Yeah, is that what you're trying to explain? Because that's what I'm hearing.
Sure, yeah. I would say that conscious spiritual beings that are aligned against God are in this man. All right? I'm not going to go so far as to say there is only one and it's the devil and the devil is in, but I believe that what the author is communicating to us, and I believe that it's true, is that these are other spiritual beings that have aligned themselves against God, and that they have taken control of this man's life, as we're going to talk about. Yeah, Mike.
Was that an exorcism?
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is, in common language, we're looking at an exorcism. That's what we're looking at.
So the demons were speaking with Legion's voice.
The demons, the demons are speaking. I would even say the demons are speaking for themselves, through the man's body. Yep. So they're in his body. They're using his voice, and it seems as though the demons are identifying themselves. Our name is Legion because we are many. And you guys are all going down my outline right now. This is perfect. You guys know where I'm going, so I can just refer to a conversation we've already had when we get there. This is great. So I just want to say, the two temptations, we don't want to dismiss it. We don't want to take it too lightly. And also, I use the word fascination here, but really what I mean is I don't want us to get too fixated on it in terms of being fearful, right? We don't want to be completely dismissive and say, oh, there's nothing real happening here. But we also don't want to get too fixated on it where we begin to become preoccupied or become fearful of demons, right? To answer just briefly Bruce's question, which is a huge conversation, and I knew it would come up tonight. I hoped it would come up tonight, but I can only put the heading on the conversation because we can't go all the way there. I do not believe that this is something that only happened in the first century. I believe that there are still cases of demon possession in the world today. We don't see it commonly in the Western world. We don't see it often. But I will say the book that Father Nathan referred to, the 2-volume set that he referred to early on in the teaching series, this Miracles book, it doesn't focus on exorcism, but there is a section about it. Toward the end, there are a couple of appendices that are about spirit possession and exorcism in the modern world. And it seems as though, and the reasons can be debated, the reasons why can be debated, it seems as though it's much more common in other parts of the world. In the global south, for instance, there seem to be a lot more instances of this today. And again, we could talk lots, we could debate, we could go back and forth about why that is or how that's experienced in different places. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it can be aligned with witchcraft. Sure. Yeah. And that's why I want to, that goes right along with the cartoonification. We want to avoid dismissing this as though there's nothing real. There's no real spiritual powers in the world. In the Western world, in the modern West, a lot of us have grown up in a Christianity that seems to at least imply, if not say outright, that our God is the only spiritual being that exists, right? That it's just God, otherwise it's a spiritual desert, and all we have to do is turn to God, right? And I would say that I don't think that's true. I'm getting ahead of myself here in terms of the teaching, but I think it's important for us to know sort of the hierarchy of strength, to know that there are spiritual beings out there who are not God, who do not want what's best for us, who are stronger than us. But there are none of them who are stronger than God, anywhere close to that. And so this is the balance between we don't want to dismiss and we don't want to be in fear, right? Because we know the one who is the strongest. But we don't want to go dabbling in witchcraft. We don't want to go looking for other spiritual beings because we might find them and they might find us, right? This is why we want to stay close to God. And I'm way down my outline at this point. Yeah.
One of the, without going too much further down, is somebody asked it about the witchcraft.
Yeah.
There's probably one of the most famous is Beyonce. She says when she goes on stage, she allows an entity to possess her. It's called Sasha Fierce. That's why she performs like she does on stage.
Interesting.
Whether that's the case or in her mind.
Sure. I'm going to make a more general statement just for the live stream that it's a common thing nowadays. It seems to be, it goes in and out of fashion, right? To talk about demons and about spiritual forces in the world, sort of on the popular level, on the level of famous people who have a platform to talk about it and to sing about it, and people show up kind of playing with these ideas, and a lot of times, I think I'm safe to say, they don't fully understand the truth of what they're talking about in a lot of cases. Yeah.
I personally think there's probably more people in the United States
that are possessed by evil spirits than we realize. And I think we might run into them and not realize it until after we really stop to digest some
Yeah.
things that they have said. Wonder why we
Yeah. Yeah.
This is my personal.
Sure, of course. Thank you. The comment was that there may be a lot more people in Western culture who are possessed by demons or who have some level of control in their life by evil forces. Yeah. Yep. There's you know what? Since we're going there, I want to read you guys a paragraph. I marked it just in case. I want to read you guys a paragraph out of this commentary that I came across this. This is a New International Version application commentary by a great scholar named Darrell Bach. And I just want to read this paragraph. It touches on a lot of what we've already been saying. It says, though we rarely deal with overt cases of demon possession, that fact should not stop us from realizing the impact the demonic has on us daily. It is not entirely clear why demon possession is so rare in the Western world. Those who work in other cultures where the demonic is more openly accepted speak openly about its presence and see more cases of demon possession than we do. Do we underestimate its presence? Or does Satan have less need to manifest himself openly in a culture that denies his existence? Listen to this next line. I suspect a combination is at work. The scripture makes it clear that a fallen world is still influenced by the presence of sin and Satan, and will be until the Lord's return finishes what this healing represents. All right? There's a line in here elsewhere where it says, you are unlikely to fight a battle against an enemy that you don't think exists, right? And so there's an argument that a lot of people make that by and large the Western world is distracted enough. The Western world isn't looking at this battle. And so Satan, the enemy, chooses to stay less obvious. That's a common belief among many people. Yeah, Linda.
There was a witches' coven not far from where I live. Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I actually met one of those women.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was, just even her physical, she never slept.
Yeah.
Her physical, and she wasn't that old,
Yeah.
but that was her spiritual belief.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It was a very large group of witches. They actually
Yeah.
where I came from before I moved here.
Yeah.
And I got into a seance.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything back then what I was doing.
Sure.
And it was scary.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It brought my emotions to a level I didn't know it was awful.
Sure.
It was they're widespread.
Yeah. So this comes back to this idea that I will put this idea in front of you as often as I get a chance, right? We become more and more like the one we choose to stay close to, right? I don't know if I might get in trouble for referencing C.S. Lewis here, since I'm not Jonathan. Jonathan, please forgive me. But the book that he wrote called The Great Divorce, which pictures life as this gradual step-by-step journey in one direction or another, right? Either closer and closer to God. And the way he pictures it, it's closer and closer to reality, right? To real solid life, to reality, to the good, to the light. You're moving closer and closer to God, or you're moving closer or further and further away from God and into unreality, into dangerous waters. You're becoming less and less a human in some ways, right? And this is all. This is nowhere on my outline, but it's gonna ring true with a lot of what we're getting into tonight. This idea of being, do we stick close to Jesus, where there is life, there is light, there is order, there is calm in the face of chaos and storms and disorder? Or do we lean into the darkness? Do we lean into the disordered places, right? We're constantly making decisions in one direction or the other, all throughout our life. And our culture would say, pick whatever you want, do it, go over here, go over there, go do a little bit of everything, right? But the Christian teaching is that it matters. It all matters, what we're deciding. And this is not to be overly fascinated or to be overly fearful of the evil. It's to acknowledge, and this is, I think I have another point. Yes, here we go. Our goal tonight is awareness without fixation, right? Awareness without being too fearful, awareness without getting so curious that we're going to go looking for the evil side, right? But awareness without fixation. So let's get into now that we had most of the conversation before we got into the story, which is great. I love that you guys are asking the questions. Let's get into the background and the introduction here. So we have a couple kinds of location to look at. We have the location of the story in Luke's gospel. And interestingly enough, this comes right after the Jesus calms the storm story, the first one that I taught on a few weeks ago. This is the very next story, is after the boat lands, after that night with the storm. This is the next story, and then it comes right before the story where Jesus raises the dead girl and heals the sick woman that Jonathan taught on a few weeks ago. It's sandwiched between those two stories. And interestingly, there was a question earlier on, is this an exorcism? And this is actually the fourth exorcism that Jesus does, the fourth healing from a demon possession in the Gospel of Luke. It just happens that it's the longest and most involved one in a number of ways. But there have already been 3 others in chapter 4 and chapter 6 and chapter 8. Another thing about location, we've talked about the synoptic gospels, right? The gospels that see together, that tell a lot of the same stories about Jesus. And this is in all 3. This story is in Matthew chapter 8. It's in Mark chapter 5 as well. And we're going to come back and reference both of those because of details that they include as we go tonight. Lastly, about location, we have on the map. Here we go. It is across the sea, across the big lake, right? So Jesus is crossing with his disciples over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And this is an area known as the Decapolis, or the 10 cities. And yes, those of you who are questioning about the herd of pigs, you are exactly right. This is a predominantly non-Jewish region. This is predominantly a Gentile region where this story takes place. And so this is the first exorcism that Jesus does in Gentile territory. And this is a way of Luke showing us that the ministry of Jesus is expanding, right? The ministry of Jesus is expanding outside of Jewish territory into Gentile territory. And we know the end of the story, that the ministry of Jesus is going to reach the ends of the world eventually, right? So we are moving outward, we're moving across, and Luke and Mark, by the way, Luke and Mark both put the story here in the region of the Gerasenes, and Matthew puts it in the region of the Gadarenes. So he puts it in a different town, but in the same region. Just an interesting fact, yeah.
Is this Jesus' first venture into Gentile territory?
Is it his first actual venture into Gentile territory in Luke? Good question. This is one of those moments where I'm going to say, I do not learn things and hold them all in my brain. So I would have to look that up.
Because it seems to me that would explain why the people were terrified, because they see something like,
Yeah.
they
Yes.
Yeah, that also brings to the other thing. Why did the man possessed go to see him?
Yeah.
Because the demons didn't want to see him.
Okay. Why did the man go to see him? Great question. We're about to get into that. Yes. You said it might explain why they're so afraid of Jesus, right? If they have had no contact with him. And I think that's a really good point. I think that's a great point. I think it's safe to say that this is the first time Jesus is in this town, in this particular region. I don't want to be bolder than I am certain and say this is his first time stepping into predominantly Gentile territory in Luke. But that's a great question. All right, so let's move on here. What do we know about this man? What do we know about the man? Luke gives us a short introduction with a lot of information in the first 2 verses. He says, for a long time, he had been homeless and naked, living in the tombs outside the town. Now, we're going to learn more about this guy's situation in a few verses, right? But right off the bat, the first words Luke tells us, the first words he says about this man is for a long time. For a long time. For a long time. This situation, this is just the way things are for this guy. It's not saying this just happened yesterday. It's not saying this was an acute case of demon possession, not a chronic, right? No, this is long-term. This is a long-term situation. Homeless and naked. Homeless. This man is isolated, right? It tells us that he was kept from being in relationship. He was kept from being in relationship with his family, with his community, by this state that he is in. He's naked. He's kept from being able to meet his own basic needs, right? We talk about the basic needs of clothing and shelter and food. We know that this guy is not clothed and he is not living in a house. He's not living inside the town. Altogether, we could say that he is out of relationship, right? If you remember from a few weeks ago when we were talking about the storm, the juxtaposition between order and chaos and the ancient idea of creation as being put in order and put in right relationship, right? This guy's life is all out of order and he is completely out of relationship. This guy is in chaos. So in the Hebrew mind, in the Hebrew worldview, this guy is well on his way to uncreation, right? He is moving away from the light. He is moving away from God, against his will at this point, at least. So it says he's living in the tombs, right? We might put this very poetically. You made the comment earlier. He was allowed to live, right? The people in his neighborhood, in his community, they've not killed him. They've kept him among the living, and yet he's very much among the dead, right? Literally, he is living in the tombs.
Maybe that's because he had family there, as they say.
Well,
Maybe
yeah.
he was from a well-known family and they respected him enough not to.
Could be.
I mean, if
Could
I
be.
had a family and there was somebody like that living in my neighborhood, I don't think I'd live in the neighborhood.
Sure.
It seems like he was vulnerable, and that's why these spirits would take over you. It was easy enough to...
Well, we don't know anything about this man's background before this moment. We know that at this moment, he's homeless, naked, living in the tombs. But he's got a bunch of demons inside him. We don't know what his life looked like before. Jesus says at the end of the story, go back to your family. Go home to your family, right? So there was a time when this man was living in a house with a family in the town. But for whatever reason, he has been driven away either by the demons or by his community, by his family. We don't know. We're not told. But he's been driven outside of the town so that he's living in the tombs at this point, probably in cave tombs. Yeah.
Well, it says even when he was
Yeah.
might indicate that the authorities of the town had tried to lock him up,
Yeah.
but the demons in him made him so strong.
Yep.
He was able to break them.
That's a great catch. Thank you so much. It actually tells us in the text, even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles. So we sometimes see pictures, like we did in our mosaic at the beginning, we sometimes will see a picture of chains being broken right there in the graveyard, because it's trying to tell us the whole story. But it may be that he was chained up in town. He was locked up because they wanted to keep him safe, but they didn't want him loose. But these demons have made him so strong that he breaks the chains. And get this, the demon drives him into the wilderness. The demon drives him into the place of what? Disorder, chaos, right? We talked about the garden versus the wilderness. The place of order versus the place of disorder. The demon is driving him physically into the wilderness, into the place of disorder. So this is where he finds himself, living outside the town. Outside the town. And I want to spend, even though we're only in the second verse, I want to spend a little time here too, because there's significance to the term or the phrase outside the city in Hebrew thought. All right? Outside, well, I shouldn't go there quite yet. Outside the town, outside the city, is a place for the rejects, a place for the cast-offs of society, right? And there's an explanation of this idea. It's all kinds of places in Scripture. You see this idea come up, but there's a little explanation of it in Hebrews chapter 13, where the author is relating it to Jesus and to what Jesus has done for us. And he says this, he says, under the old system, the high priest brought the blood of animals into the holy place as a sacrifice for sin, and the bodies of the animals were burned outside the camp. So also Jesus suffered and died outside the city gates to make his people holy by means of his own blood. So let us go out to him outside the camp and bear the disgrace he bore. For this world is not our permanent home. We are looking forward to a home yet to come. So this is a very simple way to notice when something is important in Scripture, right? Because these words are intentional. And anytime you see one phrase or one idea that's repeated that many times in that few lines, that's something we're supposed to notice, right? Outside the camp is the place for the rejects. It's the place of disgrace. It's the place for things that are thrown away. And when Jesus becomes this final sacrifice for all time, for all the world, Jesus suffered and died outside the city gates, right? And the author of Hebrews is saying, let's go to where Jesus is. Let's be willing to bear disgrace and dishonor for the sake of Jesus, to be close to him, to imitate him, to do what he does, right? And so even as we see this, let us imitate Jesus. In this very story that we're in the Gospel of Luke tonight, what does Jesus do? Jesus meets a man outside the town. Jesus goes outside the city gates to meet with this man who has been cast off, who has been disgraced, right? So that's the context here. There goes my paperclip. No one can do anything about this situation. He's been this way for a long time. He's outside the town. He's homeless. He's naked. He's out of relationship. And that's the situation that Jesus rolls up on when he lands with his disciples in the boat. There was a hand over here. Was it you, Mike?
I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay. If you think of it, let me know. But that's okay. So that's what we have leading up to this encounter. We're not given everything. In some ways, it's an unsatisfying introduction, right? But there's also an awful lot there about what state this guy is in. and what Jesus is coming up to. So,
I have a question.
yes.
Why did he say, "Why are you interfering with me, and I beg you don't torture me"? What did this man think about Jesus was going to do to him?
Beautiful transition. The question was, what did this man think Jesus was going to do to him? I'm going to come back to that in just a second. I want you to think about the last time you encountered something that surprised you and scared you. Just think of it in your mind. Think of it in your mind. I wish we had, like I said, 3-hour teaching, right? We would go around and everybody would have one. I'm thinking of the black widow spider that I came across in my shed in Kentucky. It was not a great time, right? When we encounter something that surprises us, that scares us, getting back to my slides here. I want you to look at this encounter and think about in what direction the encounter happens, right? If one of us were to meet a person who was so obviously and disturbingly under the control of an evil spiritual being, I suspect that most likely the encounter would happen with us being the one shrieking, the one being disconcerted, right? But I want to submit to you that in this situation, the encounter happens in the other direction. Did you see it?
Yeah, because they're, with the demons being spirit beings, they knew who Jesus was because they could see God.
Yes.
They didn't see the human.
Right.
Jesus, they saw God.
Yep. Exactly.
That was their frightening. It would be like, the king with the clothes where he's naked when he realized
Yep.
that I'm naked.
Yep. Absolutely. Several of you are going to be impressed with yourselves when you see points on my outline tonight because you're naming them. You're getting there ahead of me, which is awesome.
So it wasn't the man speaking.
Exactly. So the question about the...
Begs the question too, why did they even go near Jesus? They knew who he was.
Right.
And they didn't
Right.
cast out.
Right. So the picture we get, I can't explain that. There's mystery here. There's mystery here.
Had a moment of sanity.
Yeah. It could be.
Looking for healing.
Yep.
Knowing who was coming.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the spirits said, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This guy.
We're getting to a time in here where Luke gives us another little bit of background about how this man has been affected and been dealing with this spirit, with these demons. And it says the demons often took control of him. It doesn't say always, it says often. And so I do wonder, I think that's a great catch. I do wonder if the man saw Jesus and he ran towards him and then the demons take control, right? I don't want to split hairs too much. I don't want to say that with certainty, but it seems to be that even though it says he yelled these things, it seems to be that the demons are saying, don't hurt us, right? The demons are the ones who have the encounter. And I just love that. I love that we see the demons fall on the ground and shriek when Jesus lands on the shore. Jesus comes off the boat and Jesus is calm. Jesus walks right up and the demons fall on the ground and shriek. Your reputation precedes you is my next point here, right? The demons speak and they say, where am I here? They say, why are you interfering with me? Jesus, Son of the Most High God, please, I beg you, don't torture me. For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. So the demons know who he is. And this happens other places in the Gospels as well. The demons speak. And there are times when Jesus says, be quiet. I don't want that getting out just yet. But the demons correctly identify Jesus as the Son of the Most High God. They are seeing in the spiritual world, right? And we're gonna say a little, we might say a little more about that in a while here. The demons are recognizing Jesus, and so they're immediately recognizing the power dynamics at play here, right? There's no pretense. The demons are immediately begging. They're immediately begging with Jesus. They know that they're outmatched, right? And there's a significant insight here with from Matthew's account. In Matthew's account, he has the same exchange, except he says, the demons say, "Have you come here to torture us before God's appointed time?" All right, that's an insight that Matthew gives us. So Matthew is communicating that not only do the demons know who he is, not only do they know that they're about to be defeated in this moment, they know there's an ultimate defeat that's coming as well. And they make reference to it and say, are you trying to jump the gun, Jesus? Are you trying to do this before the appointed time, right? They're trying to get him on a technicality. That's a great word. So in fact, Jesus has already, oh boy, what am I doing? In fact, Jesus has already acted, right? Jesus has already ordered the demons to come out, the text tells us. And this is exactly something that's already been said. This is a window into the unseen, right? We get to, one of the commentaries said, this is an audio visual of something that we don't usually see, we don't usually hear. This is an interaction that has to do with the real battle that Jesus is fighting, that we don't often see, the spiritual battle. And there's a clarity here, an understanding between Jesus and the demons that goes beyond the words that are spoken. Everybody knows what's happening, and the words are given for our benefit, right? So verse 29, there's kind of a by the way here that Luke gives us. By the way, the demons had often taken control of the man, and he simply broke the chains. He simply broke the chains and the shackles. So there's a struggle for control in this man's life. And this demon is interacting with the material world. These demons are interacting with the material world, but in an unnatural way, right? The demons are able to do things through him that are not normal. And without going there fully, this is something that has been attested in modern cases as well. Modern exorcists will talk about people's bodies being able to do things that they would not normally be able to do in cases where there's possession. So there's an insight from Mark here that I really don't want to skip over. I should for time, but I don't want to skip over it. In Mark's account, he goes so far as to say no one was strong enough to subdue him in this story in Mark. He makes that specific claim. And a really cool thing, 2 chapters before this story in Mark, so in Mark chapter 3, Jesus is being confronted, and he's being told, we think that you cast out demons by the power of Satan. We think that you are casting out evil, but you're doing it because you're evil, Jesus. And he says this, he says, how can Satan cast out Satan? We know this argument well, right? He says, if Satan is divided and against himself, how can he stand? He would never survive. And then he says this, he says, who is powerful enough to enter the house of a strong man and to plunder his goods? Only someone even stronger, someone who could tie him up and then plunder his house. So in Mark's account of this story, in the context, before Mark's account of this story in chapter 3, in the context of a conversation about casting out demons, Jesus compares Satan himself to a strong man. And he says, in order to beat the strong man and take his stuff, you got to be even stronger. And then in 2 chapters later, when Mark gets to this narrative, he makes the point, by the way, no one was strong enough. No one was strong enough to defeat this strong man and to take his stuff.
This is the unfortunate
What?
This is unfortunate
What's unfortunate?
because the demons knew exactly who Jesus was.
Yeah.
The people that were standing around or bringing up these questions
Yeah.
did not.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
unfortunate.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's a lot that's kept from people in conversation with Jesus. There's a lot where he says, if you have the ears to hear, hear. That he's not speaking. That's a whole separate question, my friend. But so Jesus shows up on the scene where there is a strong man that no one can defeat until he gets there, right? And he ties up the strong man in this story, and he takes back his stuff. And his stuff is the man himself. The strong man is the demons, and the stuff that he's guarding is the man. So, moving along here, out into the wilderness. We already talked about that, completely under the demon's power. Yes, this is our next important point. The man is completely powerless to resist the demon at this point in his life. But the demon is completely powerless to resist Jesus. And this gets back to what we were saying at the start, right? In our question and answer. It's important for us to keep this in mind. There are spiritual forces out there that are stronger than any one human. There are no spiritual forces out there that are stronger than Jesus Christ. And this is, if you have one takeaway from tonight, let this be it, right? Let this be it. So the next, I'm going to skip over a couple things here. So pay no attention as these slides go by. We have the name. What is your name? Legion, signifying if there's many of them. Next slide is called stage 3, bargaining, right? The demons can't even run away. The demons can't even run away from Jesus without permission. That's a really interesting point. They say, please let us go. Please let us go into these pigs. They're asking permission to turn and run from this man that Jesus wants to reclaim, right? So my next point, be careful what you wish for, right? The demons say, we want to go into those pigs. And we all know the story. The pigs run straight down the hill into the lake and they drown. And even though the demons are allowed by Jesus to go exactly where they think they want to go, they still end up where they don't want to be, right? And this is the moment where we can find a little bit of humor, because the demons are not made out to be very cunning, to be very smart. They're on the back foot. They're trying to figure out what to do. And Jesus lets them go where they want to go, but it ends up being a bad place, right? We got to keep moving. I'm so sorry. So you hit on it right away at the beginning. The abyss. The word used for bottomless pit here, the Greek word is the abyss. This is a place that in Hebrew thought, in Hebrew literature, it's associated with the depths. Sometimes the depths of the ocean, sometimes the place under the earth. Don't make us go into the deep, into the bottomless pit. And there are some examples here. In the Septuagint, in the Greek version of the Old Testament, right? This same word, this word that comes to us straight from the Greek as abyss, is used in all these contexts and more. And you'll recognize some of these from the storm teaching, right? From the chaos. The places where God controls the deep, where there's a place that's uncreated, uncontrolled, that's abyss in the Greek Old Testament, right? So the demons are not wanting to go back there. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that we don't know what happened to the demons. We're not told whether they were destroyed, but there were a few different schools of thought on how to control demons, how to kill demons, whether demons could be killed in ancient Jewish thought. And so one of the commentators I was reading said there were various theories about demons being able to be imprisoned in the atmosphere, or being able to be imprisoned in deep water or under the earth. And there were some Jewish traditions at some times that thought demons could be killed, and that they might be killed when their host died, like these pigs. So that's not terribly helpful for us, for our modern Western question of what exactly happened, right? But it is helpful for how the people who first heard these gospel stories would have received it, right? Some of them may have heard these demons were killed. Some of them may have heard they were waylaid from their preferred experience. They were held up for a while in this lake, right? Either way, they're losing in the story, and the man is being freed. So we are out of time, which is crazy. I'm so glad we had the conversation that we had. We had the back and forth that we had. Where we were going next is reactions, right? And you all spoke to it in the beginning. Why would the people send Jesus away, right? A key point from these reactions is that the ones who hear the news, the ones who hear what happened from the people who saw it and were scared by it first, they say, Jesus, get out of here. We don't understand this. We don't want any part of this. Also, those pigs were our livelihood. Those pigs were a big part of our economics in this town. We don't want any more of that to happen. They didn't understand, and so they begged him to go. On the other hand, the man who was healed begs to stay close to Jesus, right?
And he becomes a disciple of Jesus.
Well, when close, the question was, he becomes a disciple. He begs to follow Jesus, and Jesus says, no, stay here. Jesus says, go back to your family, go back to your right relationship, right? And he says, tell everyone what God has done for you. Some people are called to go and tell. Some people are called to stay and tell, right? And that's useful for us. What's important to see is that immediately after he's freed, after he has this experience of being rescued by Jesus from this disorder, from this pain, from this isolation, when the people come flocking and they see him, he is sitting at Jesus' feet. So immediately, in the moments after he's restored, he's in the posture of a disciple. Exactly that, sitting at Jesus' feet, right?
That's the each one reach one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Go and tell what God has done for you, right? And that's something we can take. Many of us have been rescued in various ways, in all kinds of ways, from different places where we have been imprisoned, where we have felt or been isolated, right? Where we have been out of order within ourselves and out of relationship. And when we've had that experience with Jesus, it is important for us to go and tell, because that's a personal story, right? That's not theory anymore. That's a personal testimony. And imagine the zeal with which this guy told his story, right? With which he testified. I had better, there's our reminders. Closing with this: a mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing.